It's Monday. Welcome to the Big Me Kickoff. I'm your host, Kevin Noon. It is February 13th. Don't forget to get your sweetheart something for Valentine's Day. Super Bowl Sunday has come and gone. We got a lot of stuff going on here. Making the mistake of recording this downstairs. As you know, those of you who watch, I have 2 kittens and we just got a puppy. So now everybody is running around crazy and I have babysitting duty. So it's probably best for me to be down here as the puppy is only 9 weeks old. If she runs by, I will put her on camera, but I don't know where she is at the moment. Don't tell my wife. Lots to talk about, obviously, with the Super Bowl being in the rearview mirror. 57, I think it is. I'm not the best at Roman numerals. That's fine. It doesn't matter. What mattered is Kansas City 38, Philadelphia 35, in a game that for 58 minutes, everybody was thoroughly enjoying. Then a penalty comes out and people lose their ever-loving mind. We had a defensive holding call. Had a lot of people who came out and said, well, the pass was uncatchable. Well, that matters on PI. That doesn't matter on defensive holding, because a lot of that too has to deal with when the ball leaves the quarterback's hands and things of that nature. And I think that part of the narrative was screwed up by the fact that when Fox aired the replay, they aired it a little too late. And there were 2 potential infractions, the same penalty, but at different points. And they picked it up before the second one. So you didn't see the first one. And I think everybody automatically assumed that the fix was in, the NFL was helping Pat Mahomes out, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. When you look at the full replay, while it was not the most egregious penalty, it certainly was penalty worthy. Do you make the call right then? Is a penalty in the 59th minute? Is a penalty that's a penalty in the first minute or the 34th minute or the 7th minute? Is it still a penalty in the 59th minute? Watched hockey for a long time in my life, and the term swallowing the whistle, and it certainly happens in playoff hockey, especially if you get into like an overtime. And they're out there doing everything they can, and you better. I mean, if you don't draw blood, you're not going to get a penalty call generally in late hockey in the playoffs. And that's changed a little bit. It used to be much worse or better, depending on how you viewed it. It used to be much more prevalent 10 years ago, 20 years ago. I don't even remember. I certainly can remember games back in the 90s, the 80s, and what was a penalty in the first period was not a penalty in the 4th period being overtime or the 5th period being double overtime. So you end up having the Chiefs making the smart plays. They get the call. Then they have an opportunity to score a touchdown. The back McKinnon decides to go down at like the 2-yard line, which was a smart play. And they're able to run the clock out and kick the field goal. Reminds me of another game in that building. Here's bringing it home. When Ohio State and Texas played in the Fiesta Bowl, Ohio State was inside the 10, scored the touchdown, and that really was the wrong play at the time. It's hard in the moment to sit there and say, I'm not going to score the touchdown. I've been trained my whole life in playing the sport. Score the touchdown, to take a knee and allow it to become a situation of where it's a field goal. Didn't end up happening. Texas ends up coming back and winning the game. So we've seen it. So bringing it home at that point. But what were your thoughts on the game? I certainly am no Eagles fan. I know that flies in the face of Mark Givler here on the site, who is a huge Eagles fan. But I've been a Cowboys fan much longer than I've known Mark. And he hired me despite knowing my allegiance in terms of NFL football. So there you go. So we got that. So it was a fun game. I think that the commercials were a little lackluster. We'll talk about the commercials probably tomorrow. We're going 5 days a week, by the way, if I didn't say that off the top. I had to deal with fighting animals, and this is my second attempt at the podcast. So what I said there, I may not have said here. We're going to try and go 5 days a week, maybe live as many as 2 times a week. So be sure to hit that subscribe button, hit that bell. Don't miss a single edition of the Big Me Kickoff. If you're watching us on YouTube, all of that certainly helps us with the algorithm, helps us do more shows like this. If you're listening on iTunes or any of those systems, leave us a 5-star review. It doesn't take much. You can just 5 stars. Noon's awesome. I would appreciate that. And it would be very true. It would be very true. But all of that helps us out. And check out everything at youtube.com/Buckeye Huddle. We've got Buckeyes Tomorrow Morning. We got the Buckeye Weekly Podcast. We have Mark Givler's Skull Session Recruiting Podcast. Alex Lightman weighs in occasionally with his own show. Got some more things in the hopper, but all of that is with you guys helping us out. And you can do that a couple of ways. Again, hit that thumbs up, that bell, subscribe to the channel. That doesn't cost anything. Those of you who want to help us out more, come to BuckeyeHuddle.com and check us out over there. That is our day job. That is what we do for real. All of the best recruiting coverage, all the best team coverage. Yeah, basketball is pretty bad right now, and we'll talk about that here in a second. But just check us out. I mean, for $12.99 a month, less than a crummy pizza, you can get the best Buckeye coverage out there. And, of course, I would be eternally grateful if you signed up for the site. Give us a month. Sign up for a year. Check it all out. But enough with the plugs right now. Last week, and I haven't had an opportunity to talk about this one yet, the SEC and the Big 12 and Texas and Oklahoma all came to an agreement. And it will allow Texas and Oklahoma to leave the Big 12 after this 23 season. So at the same point that USC and UCLA joined the Big 10, Texas and Oklahoma will join the SEC. Now, the Big 12 is a little bit of a convoluted mess this year because the 4 teams from the American come over. Texas and Oklahoma are still there. So this will be very much a weird year in the Big 12. I don't know how well any of these new teams going in, including Cincinnati, are going to be able to compete against a conference that has already been established. They already know what everybody else in the league does. I mean, yeah, there are going to be some advantages for these new teams that maybe they haven't been studied to death the way that these other teams have. But Cincinnati and Temple and these schools are going to suffer as well when they don't have any study on any of the league games on their schedules. So it'll be interesting to see. Of course, there's been a lot of talk from Texas and Oklahoma fans. How bad is the Big 12 going to screw us because we're on our way out in terms of referee calls and things of that nature? You know, bringing it back home again, refereeing is no easy task. We've seen a lot of issues, a lot of weird calls. I don't know if any official is going to be going out there with some sort of mandate to sit there and tie goes to the remaining members. Everything is so bang, bang. It's hard to be like, oh, I have an agenda too. I have to punish these teams for the good of K-State, for the good of Baylor. I mean, I don't know. I don't see that coming in. But what about the Pac-12? We've talked about a couple of the conferences. The Pac-12 is looking reportedly at San Diego State, which makes a little bit of sense, and SMU. Is SMU going to be some sort of grand savior for the Pac-12? Pac-12 hasn't announced any sort of rights deals, so they're obviously waiting to expand. And I don't know if, sure, SMU is in the Dallas market. There is a Pac-12 network that's there. I don't know anybody who gets it, short of in the Pac-12 footprint. I assume there's some sort of metrics in there that you can charge more for available households the way that BTN works. So maybe there's a little bit more money there. Getting SDSU brings Southern California back into it with SC and UCLA both leaving a big gap in that gigantic populous state. But doesn't it feel like people are kind of waiting to see what's happening? And there was a report out there that Arizona State is pissed off about some of these moves that are being made. Could we see the Pac-12 collapse soon? A lot of people want to talk about Oregon and Washington and the Big Ten. Let me remind you, the Big Ten doesn't have a commissioner right now. It does in terms of Kevin Warren, who is on his way out. He will be joining the Bears, I believe, in April. We're in mid-February, so it means we have 2 months. We have 2 months to see what the Big Ten is going to do in terms of a new commissioner. They've gone out and added a search firm that should help expedite the process a little bit. Remember when Warren was hired, he was supposed to have all of this build-up time with Delaney, and then the world shut down. So I would feel better, even if it's somebody who is an administrator, even if they do go to the ACC and pull Jim Phillips, the former Northwestern AD, and bring him back to the Big Ten, which I don't think is the right move at this point. I like Jim Phillips. I think Jim Phillips has a lot of good ideas. I just don't know if he's the right move. I don't know who is the right move. I mean, and I could sit there and say, hey, who would you like to see as the new Big Ten commissioner? I don't know. I mean, after I get through all the Jim Tressel, Gene Smith type comments, because that's, you want to put in somebody that you know, where do you go from there? I mean, how do you really know who's ready to step into a conference commissioner job? Does the Big Ten look a little bit more at, was Kevin Warren, did he fit the need of negotiating the television package? And that was really why he was brought in, and they knew that he was a short-term hire, that he had bigger aspirations to get back into the NFL. He would certainly like to replace Roger Goodell as NFL commissioner at some point. Do you now go in and hire somebody who's a little bit more of a lifer, or does that not exist anymore? Is there not a situation? There are not a lot of people out there right now who are going to work for some company for 30 years, get the gold watch and the ham upon retirement, and sail off into the sunset. Those days don't exist anymore. I mean, unless you're self-employed right out of the gate and have your own electrical company or your own plumbing company or whatever, and you work it until you're done and hand it off to your kids or whoever, it just doesn't exist that much. So, it'll be interesting to see where the Big Ten goes with a lot of that, because I don't know. I don't know what the next move is. I certainly have heard some names mentioned, Jim Phillips being one of them. You look at the moves by the Big 12 and the Pac-12, they've gone off the board. I mean, when you bring in somebody who's more involved, like Vegas, like the Pac-12 commissioner, and I don't remember where the Big 12 commissioner came from, but it wasn't exactly through the traditional channels. Are they going to get away from hiring a former AD? Get away from maybe hiring even like a deputy commissioner in a conference, or maybe a smaller conference commissioner, moving somebody up from the group of five into Power Five or whatever. I don't really know. It's not something that's being talked about a lot, but what I wanted to get out there and talk a little bit in advance of people saying, well, Washington and Oregon are right there for the picking. Well, who's going to initiate those conversations? I mean, I guess theoretically you could have a conference commissioner, or I'm sorry, an AD or a president or chancellor start talking. It's not necessarily tampering at this point, I don't believe. The commissioners there on behalf of the chancellors and presidents. So if you just take the commissioner out of the mix, I guess theoretically you could have talks, but we've gone round and round, and we'll do a show on it coming up soon, like a reset about where we stand on conference realignment. Are we getting closer to 2 conferences, 3 conferences? I mean, we're not talking about the ACC and their grant of rights, but their lawyers working on that. So a lot going on. The goal on these shows are most of the recorded shows are going to be about 15 minutes, which we're closing in on. Live shows will go longer. I want to make sure I have an opportunity to promote those live shows with you. Looking to have guests along the way, more than just Tom and Tony, even though they're always welcome on the show. But a lot of things going on. So I'm really looking forward to this. I'm really looking forward to the opportunity to be able to do more shows. It's been on my list of things to do. And of course, I picked the slowest time of the season, but it's not that slow. Winter conditioning's here. Spring football, is a month away, maybe less. So there's plenty going on. I'm going to be going to a combine this week to go see some high school athletes. A lot of things are going to be happening. So keep it locked in here. Once again, I'm going to give you 3 seconds to hit that subscribe button, that thumbs up, and that bell. 3, 2, 1, hit that button or those buttons. Be sure not to miss a single episode. Again, we'll be doing these more on the regular, so you should be getting alerted. But until then, have a wonderful start to the week, and I'll talk to you all very soon, as in tomorrow.